Hello guys, my name is Anna and I'm a Ukrainian, and I have decided I will vlog daily from my country Ukraine since the start of this awful war with Russia. And in my daily videos I try to update you on the important real-life situations in my country Ukraine, and of course I'm always glad to answer your questions and to clarify some facts from our history, our culture, our background, or whatever interests you. And today I film a video I hate recording because I want to talk about these awful findings in the town of Izium in Kharkiv region. And these are hundreds of dead bodies of Ukrainians who were killed just because they are Ukrainians. I knew something terrible was happening in the regions that were occupied by Russians, but once again, as with Bucha and Irpin, until you see the photos, until you see the videos, you do not believe something similar is possible in the 21st century in the heart of Europe. I know that, for example, various missions of the United Nations, they closely follow and count the number of victims of Russian war in Ukraine. And among civilians, they state there are more than 15,000 people who suffered and approximately 6,000 people who died during this war, civilians, I mean. Of course, the numbers are much higher, and in many towns, in many districts, it is just impossible to perform these missions. From what I know, civilians are always more vulnerable to various military actions because they are not prepared. There are many women, children, older people who are not ready to escape, who do not know all the rules. That's why sometimes during full-scale wars, the number of victims among civilians can be larger than those among the military. And Russians are completely violent people. Russian soldiers, I think they have to be later executed in hundreds and thousands, because what they are doing here is an example of a genocide, and we will talk about that at the end of this vlog after I will tell you my thoughts and my emotions. And in general, when you look at statistics, more than 400 children died in the result of Russian war in Ukraine. And there is nothing that can stop them in their idea to erase Ukrainian nation and Ukrainian freedom. Of course, they will fail, but I remember watching the photos from Bucha and Irpin. I had a vlog on that in my earlier recordings. And these photos, they did not let me sleep for a couple of nights because I was terrified with what I saw. Once again, when you know that full-scale war is going on in your country, even if you live in a semi-safe zone as I am, you cannot live normal life, because you realize that hundreds of your countrymen die just because they have the same identity as you are, they share the same culture, they speak your language. So just because we are Ukrainians, Russians want to erase us from the planet. Of course, they will fail, but the actions they take, the people who died during this time, this is all tragedies, hundreds and thousands of Ukrainian tragedies that we go through daily. When I watched the photos from Bucha and Irpin, and I saw all of these young people wearing clothes similar to the ones that young people in my city wear, and they were so ordinary, they were so normal, I could recognize and imagine similar people like they are. Maybe you have drunk coffee with such people, you were in the cinema, or you went shopping somewhere in Kyiv and you have come across them, and never before the start of this war they could have imagined they would be killed by a Russian soldier. They would be tortured because we all lived normal life, and there were no reasons to kill students, no reasons to kill doctors, no reasons to kill even Ukrainian soldiers, because they trained safely and served safely just on the territory of Ukraine. We did not attack any other countries, and we won't. So this is awful when you see ordinary people wearing ordinary clothes, living in an ordinary city, killed one day because Russian soldiers came here to kill us, to loot us, to rape us, to destroy our country, and to say that we are liberated now and want to become back a part of this dark, dim Russia. So in Bucha and Irpin, the occupation lasted only 1 month, and there were 1,300 something victims. And these were fresh bodies, if it's possible to say so. And still there are more than 300 people missing. And what strikes me most when I read newspapers, I see that many people who lost their loved ones, they want to find their bodies. This sounds awful, but they want normal burial, they want normal DNA analysis, they want identification, and they want to close this story, like to make it a part of their family history. And for many, for hundreds, it is still impossible. So we can only imagine how many of such missing people and missing bodies will be in the cities and towns and regions and districts that are now deoccupied by Ukrainian armed forces. Of course, our counter-offensive is an example of a great success, but I feel very sorry for thousands of people who did not manage to wait and see the day of their liberation. There are lots of beautiful footages how they meet Ukrainian soldiers, but so many are now in the forests and in the soils of these regions killed just because they were Ukrainians. The city of Izium that terrified all us with these findings is a small town in Kharkiv region. Its population before the war was approximately 46,000 people. And now one of the cemeteries has 440 or something bodies. And these are not just bodies of the Ukrainian soldiers, but also of unknown civilians. And the majority of these bodies have signs of torture. Many people are killed with their arms tied behind the back, with ropes on their necks, with various signs of harm that was made to their bodies. And this looks really awful. And this is an example of a modern day genocide. And the tragedy is that many of them will never be found. There are lots of families that were executed together and no one is looking for anyone. And this is the reality of Ukraine too. So of course I do like the support you demonstrate us, and I would say be brave like Ukraine, but we don't have to forget about the daily tragedy that Ukrainian people go through. And I will be just like our president, saying it is never enough. Help, understanding, support. It's not about money, gas, petrol, products. It's not about saving somebody's face. It's not about looking for geopolitical positions. It's about an awful dark monster that was born in Russia and now wants to eat Ukraine and continue eating other beautiful countries just because they are evil, jealous, dark, and full of hatred. So I know that many of you don't like when I say genocide about Ukrainians, but looking at what happened in so many towns and villages that were occupied by Russia for half a year, there is no other word that I can use. Genocide, according to its classical definition, is the complete or partial destruction of nation, ethnic group, religious group, race group, and so on. And when you look at social media, at interviews and intercepted calls of Russian soldiers, you hear that they go to Ukraine to erase Ukrainian nation, that they hate those who speak Ukrainian language, that they deny the existence of our identity and those who describe themselves as Ukrainian. So even on this theoretical basis, they understand it as genocide against Ukrainians, that they don't want to exist. Also, genocide is not always an execution. Sometimes it is awful living conditions that lead to death. This is what we see in various camps and various cities that are now occupied or were occupied by Russia. It is also the violent transfer of children to other territories. This is what's happening. We know that thousands of Ukrainian children are stolen and deported to Russia. And many people are tortured because they speak Ukrainian language or they have a Ukrainian flag. And maybe you saw the picture of that corpse with a Ukrainian ribbon on its wrist in Izium. And also they shoot maternity hospitals, children in buses that try to evacuate themselves from the regions, and they destroy cultural and religious objects. And there are many other examples that demonstrate they want to destroy Ukrainian nation in general. So what Russia does here is definitely genocide. And genocide must be prosecuted on a totally different level than a military conflict or a special operation. It is a war and it is a genocide against Ukrainian people organized by Putin's regime and supported by Russians. When you look at these photos, Facebook hides them. I don't know what about Twitter and other social media, but they look awful. But I make myself see these pictures because these are my countrymen who were tortured and who died just because they are Ukrainians, because they spoke our language, because they kept our traditions, and they were living peacefully on their own land, and Russians came here. So the only people to blame for this war is not politicians, not NATO or other organizations. These are Putin and his people, because his people support his actions. If they did not, he wouldn't have been their president for 22 years. They would have reacted differently at the very start of this war. What we have now is a huge tragedy. In Ukraine, this tragedy is the death of hundreds of thousands and thousands of beautiful people who could have led a different life and make my country more beautiful, stronger. In Russia, the tragedy is different. Millions of dark people poisoned by toxic propaganda, who hate the world, hate themselves, and want to export their primitive way of life, aggressive way of life, and can lead to a nuclear war or whatever. So our task is to stop them, but our task is also not only to speak about the bravery of Ukrainian people, but to understand the tragedy of Ukrainian people. I know that you support us, and I'm very grateful for that. And I'm grateful for your governments, and I'm grateful for your families, all of which do something, and all of us together stand against this evil. Also, I invite you today to visit Operator Starsky channel for a live chat, question and answer session that we're going to have together. And I'm excited because I respect his work greatly and I love watching his videos, and will be happy to accompany him today. This will be 8 p.m. Ukrainian time. You can check my channel's community board, where I will leave a link, and I will be happy to answer your questions and to see you tomorrow at 8 p.m. Ukrainian time. Thank you for buying me coffee. Thank you for becoming my patrons. Thank you for understanding how difficult it can be to be Ukrainian, but how important it is to fight against Russia together. Slava Ukraini!